With all the new technology and the abundance of information on the web, you would think that buying or selling or understanding the real estate market would be easier than ever. But ask yourself one question. Now that you've done your homework and you think you know what's going on, what do you do next? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. What are you going to do next? Good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and as you know, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock we talk about the issues that are specific to your transaction. We talk about the things that are hitting your hot buttons, the things that are making you emotional about your transaction, and we tear them apart, and we do our best to tell you about the experiences that we've had in the past to maybe help you along. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stewart Fournier, and today we're going to talk about a really hot topic that I think affects anybody that's buying a home today, and that is the idea of buying at the top of the market. What does that really mean? And it's a real concern nowadays because, as most of you know, today is January. Projecting way too far in advance. Today is September 25th, 2018, so I can date stamp this video for obvious reasons. And in today's world, in the nation, it's pretty well received that we're having a great time, a great economy, that things are pretty healthy, and that property is, as a result of that, doing pretty well. And the perception nowadays is that we're at the top of the market because a lot of people are predicting, for example, that we've had a pretty good ride for a very long time, I guess over the last 5 or 6 years, and now we've hit what most people are calling the top of the market. And using that term for a buyer can be a very, very stressful proposition. In other words, buyers immediately think, as if they don't have enough to worry about when they're buying a home, that is this really a good time to buy? Is this the optimal time to buy? And what I wanted to do today was take a few minutes and dispel some of the stresses behind that, and to show you how you can separate the idea that although you're prepared and that you're ready to go, and this happens to be a time in your life when you've saved up all the money you need to save up, or in fact you want to move and you don't necessarily want to sell because you fear that the next house you're going to buy is at the top of the market. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today and dispel some of the fears and some of the myths and some of the stresses that you're having with regard to that. And I think once I get a chance to explain some of these things, you'll feel a lot better about it. And that's the purpose of this blog. The purpose of this blog is to dispel some of the myths, dispel some of the your perceptions, dispel some of the news media that's designed to always, as we know, give bad news and try to scare you all the time. And homeownership is such an important thing that people need to be more objective about their particular situation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I do, I want to mention we are on Facebook Live, and so if you're seeing me right now, you are able to ask me a question, and I have a person asking me a question. Hi, Heidi, how are you? Not a question, but just saying hi. I appreciate that. Let me know I'm not on alone. And feel free to ask a question about anything related to real estate today. Although we do pick a subject, we do like to take the time to ask any questions if you're on the air right now, and we're happy to answer. A slight introduction, my wife and I, Randy, we practice in the South Bay. We live in Manhattan Beach. We practice in all the beach areas. We also represent on the west side. We've been involved in the business for well over 35 years combined, and we have a great deal of experience that we are excited to share with you today. We have handled short sales, we've handled foreclosures, we've handled 1031 exchanges, we've handled obviously residential sales, we've handled some commercial, and we've handled new bills as well. So we're very well versed and happy to share information today about this specific subject, and that is, should you buy at the top of the market? Ooh, everybody gets so scared about that. So let me break right into it right away. We try to keep these short. We try to keep them between 10 and 15 minutes. I have yet to get under 15 minutes, but I'm going to do my best today. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I won't see that you're actually viewing. I don't see the audience, but if there's a question, it will come up on my screen, and I'm happy to answer. So let's talk about what actually is considered top of the market. What does that really mean? Well, what that means is that most people, and really, again, this is everybody's opinion. You know, bear in mind that no one is really an expert at predicting exactly what the top of the market is. But for definition purposes, let me just clarify what is perceived as being top of the market. Top of the market basically means that houses have risen in price to a degree where they've stopped respective of people making offers. In other words, a period in time has gone by where we've seen a slight increase on a monthly basis, or even an incredible increase on a monthly or weekly basis. And then all of a sudden, that particular neighborhood, and remember, I've mentioned this many times before, you have to consider your neighborhood, not the national standings, your neighborhood. And that's another subject for another time. But what happens is in that particular neighborhood, your particular neighborhood, the neighborhood that you're looking at, that particular area has slowed down, and you're not seeing as much of an increase in price. So people like to refer that to be their definition is that's the top of the market. In other words, we're not going any higher, and chances are we're going to stagnate, and chances are for about the next 6 months or so at least, offering at that point in the market may be a disadvantage, because if you buy at that point in the market, is there a chance that property value is going to decrease, and then you're the one that is stuck at the top, who's bought their house at the top of the market, and now it's decreasing, and was that a good buy? And that's the greatest fear, right? That's the thing that people fear the most, because when we're talking houses, we're talking incredible numbers. We're talking incredible value. So that's what I want to talk about today, and to dispel some of the fear and some of the frustration you may be having about that. First of all, first things first, it's not your fault that you have that perception, because the news media, HDTV, Flip This House, all those programs are designed to talk about what's going on today in the market and what you should be doing today. And the fact of the matter is that what happens is in our psychology as a buyer, and through no fault of your own, you tend to believe that this is the way real estate cycles work, and you don't want to be caught at the top. But the problem is all those shows get away from the fact, because this is a very boring subject in many ways, that this is what you're about to do is really a long-term investment. It's not a short-term investment. It's probably, in essence, about 30 years of your life wherein you're going to be paying a mortgage off, even if you move to a new place. Basically, it's going to take you 30 years to actually purchase a home. Again, regardless of whether you buy another one. In other words, when you get into home ownership, you start paying down a mortgage, and most mortgages, as you know, are about 30 years. So comparing apples to oranges is what's going on here when you're so concerned about whether you're going to buy at top of the market, because it's an impossibility for you to span out the next 30 years of your home ownership. So that's the number one reason that I want people to take into consideration how much stress you're going to apply to your purchase today. Because in that 30-year period, which is obviously a long-term investment, a lifetime of changes are going to happen in your home ownership. And so for you to be so worried about whether you're buying at the top of the market, it really becomes inconsequential. It's just not a consideration. It may be for ego's sake, it may be because people are sharing what they did with their particular purchase, but really 30 years, pretty tough to justify that is anything but a long-term investment, not a short-term investment. Now, let's talk about specifics. Let's talk about exactly what happens when prices come down a little bit. And generally, prices come down when there, is a recession. Now, recessions happen on average, I want to say, every 3 to 4 years. I'm not an economist. That's just off the top of my head, so I'm not trying to pretend to be an expert here. But recessions are a part of our economy. You've seen it through your lifetime. I've certainly seen it through mine. And these happen about every 3 or 4 years. And that's generally when property prices decrease. And here's the interesting part. The interesting part is that they decrease or stay stagnant, don't always decrease, depending on your neighborhood again, for about 2 years. Now, I pause there for a minute because that's a very important point to realize. Remember, I talked about 30 years versus 2 years. So again, what I'm trying to do is explain to you that that you should put in perspective home ownership in those numbers. In other words, what difference does it make that for 2 years while you own a home, there may be a decrease in value, respective of the fact that you have a 30-year investment. And over those 30 years, if you have had home ownership for 30 years, you know darn well that you've done pretty well on your equity and that it's increased in price and you're in a pretty good position. So the chances that, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say you actually buy at the top of the market, and then as soon as you buy your home, there's a recession right away. That almost doesn't matter as well. And let me tell you why. The reason that that doesn't matter is that even though you have, in that 2-year period, maybe lost some value, the fact of the matter is that over the 30-year span, that's going to be, again, inconsequential. Eventually, in about 2 years, because that's, again, how long recessions last, you will go back to where you were in terms of the value, and there's an extremely good possibility that your value is going to increase. And certainly over 4 or 5 years, you're going to see some kind of a gain. So don't be so concerned about what the market's doing versus your ability to buy at the time that you're ready. And that's the most important thing. When you're ready to buy, because you've done all that you've done to put yourself in that position, buy. You're going to be safe. Unless you're thinking about selling within that 2-year period. But let's face it, most people don't buy a house. Most people don't buy a 30-year mortgage and then turn around and sell within 2 years. Now, the caveat here is that even if you have to sell within that 2 years, the option is, and in most cities this does apply, not in every city, but in most cities it does apply, you still have home ownership, and at that time you can simply rent your place out so that you don't lose your asset, so that you can actually wait for that 2-year period. If you were the unfortunate one that happened to buy just before the recession hit, you can still hang on to your property, and in about 2 years, if in fact you have to move, you still have an income matching your mortgage. So that's a real important consideration. Let's see. Long-term versus short-term, I think I beat that to death. Again, don't chase the market. Chase your motivation to buy long-term. Chasing the market is for experts. Chasing in the market and figuring out exactly when you need to buy and when you need to sell are for people that do it for a living. For you to put a stress level on yourself to chase the market is a whole lot of stress, respective of all the other things that you're learning about home purchasing. And I just think it's a waste of time. It really is. And I hopefully I've put some ideas in your head about how that is a waste of time long term. Now, the other thing that you may want to do when somebody says, "Oh, don't buy at the top of the market," is you may fall back and think, "Well, that's a good time to save. Why don't I just save while I'm waiting for the recession to play itself out?" And the problem with that is that you have to take into consideration, and again, we're talking just about a 2-year period, which is how long recessions last, whether or not the whether or not mortgage rates are going to go up. So for every nickel and dime that you save, it might be wiped out by the fact that there will be an increase in interest rates. So even if you wait 2 years and you saved for the additional 2 years, there's also a chance that the interest rate can go up, and all that time that you wasted saving may just be wiped out in the actual payment itself. So that's something to take into consideration as well. All right, we're at 15 minutes. I'm going to call it off here. I got to keep this short. I promised I would. But again, long-term versus short-term, that's what you should be most concerned about. Enjoy the fact that you're in a position now that you're about to buy a home, that you've saved up. Again, one thing I did forget to mention, if you're a renter, don't forget, while you're waiting for the 2-year period for the recession to take its place, you're also paying out rent, which is obviously something you can't recoup. And so you're wasting your money for 2 years. And if you look at it, you're actually 2 years behind on your 30-year mortgage unless you buy now. So calculate what those 2 years are wasted on rental expense are for you, because you want to start that clock. You want to start that 30-year period. And if you wait 2 years, you're 2 years behind, and it may make no difference in the world because of the interest rate, and more importantly, it will make no difference long term. You'll miss out. And it's just heartbreaking. I've seen it for year after year after year for people who hold back, play it conservative, which I don't have a problem with. It's good to be conservative to a degree, but not move forward and then actually get priced out of the market because houses become way more expensive than they can afford. There are a lot of people that are living in areas where they would not be able to afford today, but they just happened to put their both feet in and went forward and made the most of it, and it worked out just fine. That's a majority of home ownership. There are 130 million people that own their house in the United States. So it's a good measurement. Okay, that's it for today. I'm going to keep it short. One last thing before we go. Again, please, underneath the comment section here, you will see a app called the Fournier app. And what that does is it allows you to take a picture of any house in the country, any house in America, and it'll give you the value. It'll give you the value of the other houses right next door or in the neighborhood. If it's listed, it'll give you all the information about that particular listing. It tells you about the schools. It'll give you a market analysis of the area in general and that particular house. It'll give you a timeline of what the home ownership was, when it was sold last. Ton of information just by taking a picture as you're driving down the street. So we hope you enjoy that. All you need to do is give us your email and we will send the app that you can download and take it from there. Okay? We'll see you next time, 10 o'clock Tuesday, everyone. Bye-bye.